I thought actually maybe we could start actually with a quote from your older book, which is Free Speech and Why It Matters. That's correct, isn't it? And you have this quote about free speech. It is detested by tyrants because it empowers their captive subjects. It is mistrusted by Puritans because it is the wellspring of subversion. Very nice quote. But I wanted to ask about this. Are we losing, or have we even lost, the liberal argument for free speech, Andrew?
I don't think it's one that is definitively lost or won at any given time. I think it's an ongoing discussion that will never go away. That's why in the book Free Speech, I make the case that it's something you have to sort of fight for in every successive generation. You don't just sort of win free speech and then that's it. Your country's got freedom forevermore, because it doesn't come naturally to us. And we know it doesn't come naturally to us because around the world, the vast majority of civilizations, countries, not just at the moment, but throughout history, have never had it. So it is something in the nature of humanity that inches towards the corruption of power. And so therefore, given those circumstances, we have to keep making the case. So, yeah, that's my feeling about it. I'm not afraid of the discussion, and I don't think we should tire of the discussion, because there's always going to be people who want to curb the speech rights of others. That's always been the case.
All right, that makes sense. But so it's interesting. Yeah, you think we're always sort of inching towards tyranny, and it's not a universal value which doesn't come naturally to us, free speech or freedom. What about this idea from Carl Benjamin? So I sometimes think of this podcast as an evolving conversation, or I would if that term wasn't too pretentious for someone from the north. And Carl Benjamin came on the show. Now, of course, to some normies, he's sort of internet man bad, but I think he's a deep thinker and he's read a lot of big books. And he has a very interesting theory about postmodern traditionalism. And his idea was basically this: the liberal idea of universal values isn't working. So what we should try and do is sort of beat the postmodern left on their own terms. So he said they have a point that there is subjectivity. People perceive the world in their own way, and it's not necessarily inherently better or worse than anyone else's. And he's kind of accepted that. And he said, okay, well, what about the fact that as English people from England, we have certain values we prefer. He calls them our tribal gods. Things like free speech, civil liberties, fair play, cup of tea, whatever. And he sort of says, what if we appeal to them on those grounds? That, like, you say like something like the LGBTQ plus community is a thing, and I say, okay, the English community is a thing with certain values, and you, on your own terms, even though I accept your radical subjectivity and your cultural relativism, but you have to recognize that we're also a culture. How about that?
Well, in a sense, that would work so long as everyone agrees to play by the same rules. It's actually the same problem that you face with the liberal approach, which is that the truth is not everyone is a liberal. And is not liberal-minded. In that case, so let's take that idea of the postmodern view of subjectivity and that we all see the world differently. That's actually not a controversial view and all specific to postmodernism. That's something that I think we can all agree on. The difference is the postmodernists believe that there are multiple truths because our understanding of reality is wholly constructed through language. And that's a fundamental distinction. It's also why they see the world the way they do and why they see words as potential forms of violence and that kind of thing. But if you were to say, well, we have a shared notion of what it means to be, well, you say English, were you saying English or British or something, or with whatever it might be, within this community we have a sort of nexus of shared values, and you have your shared values in that other community. The first problem you face there is that there are likely to be overlaps. You know, there's definitely overlaps between those who consider themselves English and those who consider themselves part of the LGBTQ+. It's not as though once you go into that acronym, you sort of surrender any sort of nationality. So the two things are sort of overlapping for a start. There will also be disputes within each of those communities. I don't think you'll find even two people who are very patriotic to agree on absolutely everything and what it means to be an English person or an Irish person or a Scottish person, whatever that might be. So you've got to find a way to take on board the reality that we all have multiple preferences and subjective views, and that's what liberalism does. So, and just to come back to that point, if you're talking about appealing to the woke on their own terms, you know, that we are a community that deserve protection with our own truths as well, but they don't recognize certain truths. They're full of contradictions. They will say that, you know, we there are multiple truths, but yours is beyond the pale, and therefore we need to quash it and eliminate it. And they because they are an essentially authoritarian movement, that appeal to your own identity politics is one that they will never accept. They just won't accept it. They will they believe it needs to be wiped out of existence. So that's why I'm not sure that would work. Whereas the liberal approach is the best approach, because what it says is that you can do whatever you want, you can identify however you want, behave however you want, right up until the point that you are encroaching on somebody else's rights. And that strikes me as not, it's never going to be ideal, because not everyone's a liberal, so you're always going to get this pushback. That's what we're seeing at the moment through the woke. They're anti-liberal. They're essentially, the word woke, I say in the book, is the closest synonym to it is anti-liberal. I think that's right, and they are just continually pushing back against that. And we have to find ways to sort of work around them in a liberal society, because the rest of us want to have our rights to behave as we do and live the lives we want to live, but we also want them to have their rights and so they can live the way that they live. And although they reject that and they want to see us quashed, that to me is the only way a workable society can really function, unless you go down the route of tyranny. And I don't want to go down the route of tyranny.